When 10-year-old Leo, huddled inside a makeshift cardboard shelter in a rain-slicked alley, saw a thick leather wallet fall from the pocket of a giant of a man, he didn't just see money, he saw a test. A test of the person his late father had always told him to be, even when the world was cold and his stomach was empty. His decision to return it, against the gnawing hunger and the memory of his little sister's coughing through the night, set in motion a chain of events that would not only rescue his family from the unforgiving streets, but rebuild their lives from the very ground up. The alley reeked of stale beer and desperation. It was a narrow canyon carved between the brick backsides of a greasy spoon diner and a laundromat, a forgotten space where the city's refuse collected. Rainwater mixed with discarded cooking oil, creating a slick, rainbow-hued film on the cracked asphalt. The air was heavy with the metallic tang of an approaching winter, a chill that seeped through threadbare clothes and settled deep in the bones. It was a public place, yet it offered a cruel kind of privacy, the privacy of being invisible, of being a problem that most people chose not to see. This was Leo's world. From this world, he watched another. Through a gap in the dumpster, he saw the chrome gleam of motorcycles lined up like resting metal beasts. He heard the low rumble of their engines, the gravelly laughter of the men who rode them. They were huge, clad in leather vests covered in patches that looked like a secret language. They were the Iron Saints MC, and they were regulars at the Iron Skillet Diner. Among them, one man stood out. His road name was Diesel, though his birth certificate said Frank Kowalski. At 45, he was built like the industrial machines he was named after. A retired firefighter, his shoulders were broad enough to carry the weight of collapsed roofs and the memories of lives he couldn't save. His face was a roadmap of hard years, etched with lines around eyes that had seen too much smoke, too much fire, too much loss. A thick, graying beard covered a jaw that was perpetually set, as if bracing for an impact. On the back of his leather cut was the club's insignia, a stoic, winged anvil. He moved with a heavy, deliberate grace, a man who wasted no motion and no words. Diesel wasn't in a good mood. The club had just finished a charity run for a local veteran shelter, and the wallet in his back pocket was thick with the day's cash donations, over $3,000 he was responsible for dropping off. But his mind was elsewhere, caught in the anniversary of a bad call, a fire that had taken a family much like the one he'd lost himself, long ago. He was just going through the motions, his usual quiet presence a little more shadowed, a little more distant. He swung a leg over his Harley, the leather of his jeans groaning in protest. He reached into his pocket for his keys, and in that simple, distracted motion, the heavy wallet was dislodged. It slipped out, falling to the wet ground with a soft, unnoticed thud. Diesel didn't see it. His brothers, already straddling their own bikes and talking loudly, didn't see it. But Leo saw. From his hiding place, his world shrank to that small, dark rectangle on the pavement. He was small for his 10 years, a boy made of sharp angles and watchful eyes that seemed far too old for his face. His jacket was thin, his jeans were wholly at the knees, and his sneakers had long ago surrendered to the elements. Inside the cardboard and tarp shelter behind him, his 6-year-old sister Sophia was curled under a pile of filthy blankets, a tiny ball of shivering misery. His mother Maria lay beside her, her breath coming in ragged, wet coughs. She had been a nurse's aide once, before her husband's sudden death, before the medical bills, before the eviction that had pushed them into this alley. Now she worked odd jobs when her persistent pneumonia allowed, cleaning toilets or washing dishes for cash that was never, ever enough. The threat wasn't a person, it was the cold. It was the dampness that made Maria's cough worse. It was the gnawing hunger that felt like a living creature inside him. The predator was the city itself, indifferent and relentless, waiting for them to finally give up. Leo knew what was in that wallet. He knew it was their escape. Diesel was a jaded man. 20 years of kicking down burning doors and pulling people from wreckage had chipped away at his faith in the world. He had seen the best of humanity in moments of crisis, but he'd seen the worst of it in the aftermath. He expected people to be selfish, to be scared, to look out for themselves first. It was just human nature. He had dropped things before, a tool at a fire scene, a $20 bill at a gas station. They were always gone when he went back. He expected nothing less. So when he walked away from his bike, He didn't feel the familiar weight in his back pocket was missing. His mind was miles and years away, lost in a haze of smoke and regret. He was just a man moving through a world he no longer fully trusted. But in the alley, a silent, desperate battle was being waged. Leo crept from his hiding place, his movements as silent as a stray cat's. He snatched the wallet from the ground. It felt impossibly heavy in his small, cold hands. The leather was worn and soft, smelling of engine oil and something else, something like old memories. He could feel the thick stack of bills inside. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and temptation. His stomach twisted with a hunger so sharp it was almost a sound. He pictured a hot meal from the diner, a burger, fries, a milkshake so thick the straw would stand up on its own. He pictured a warm motel room, a real bed with clean sheets. He imagined the sound of his sister breathing easily, the medicine he could buy for his mother's cough silencing the awful, rattling sound that kept him awake at night. It was all right here, in his hand, a miracle. No one had seen him. The bikers were laughing, their backs to him. He could just melt back into the shadows. They would never know. They were rich, these men. They rode expensive machines and wore thick leather. To them, this money might be nothing. To him, it was everything. It was the difference between surviving another week and not. But then, another voice echoed in his mind, quiet but persistent. It was his father's voice. His dad had been a mechanic, a man with grease permanently etched into the lines of his hands, but he had carried himself with a quiet dignity. An honest man's pillow is his peace of mind, Leo, he used to say. Doesn't matter if you have $1 or 1,000. Your character is the one thing no one can ever take from you. It's the only thing you truly own. Leo looked from the wallet to the shelter where his mother and sister slept. What kind of man did he want to be for them? The kind who took what wasn't his, even out of desperation? Or the kind his father would have been proud of? The decision felt like tearing himself in two. The gnawing need battled the deep-seated principle. For a long, agonizing moment, he stood frozen in the rain, the weight of his family's future and his own soul resting in the palm of his hand. Then, he took a deep breath, clutched the wallet tightly, and ran. He scrambled out of the alley, his worn-out sneakers splashing through puddles. The group of bikers was a wall of black leather and denim, intimidating and immense. They looked like giants, like the villains from a movie. His fear was a cold knot in his stomach, almost as bad as the hunger. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to hide, but he pushed through it. He found the man, the one whose face seemed carved from stone, and tugged on the sleeve of his heavy leather jacket. The fabric was thick and stiff under his small fingers. Diesel turned, his expression annoyed, his eyes clouded with his own dark thoughts. He looked down, his gaze falling on the small, rain-soaked boy. Another kid looking for a handout, he thought, his heart hardening just a little more. "Scram, kid," one of the other bikers said, his voice a low growl. "We ain't got nothing for you." But Leo didn't look at him. His eyes were fixed on Diesel. He held up the wallet, his hand trembling slightly. "Mister," he said, his voice small but clear, "you dropped this." The world seemed to stop. The laughter of the other bikers died in their throats. All eyes went from the boy to the wallet in his hand. For a moment, Diesel just stared. He didn't understand. His mind was so far away that it took a second for the scene to register. The boy, the wallet, his wallet. He instinctively slapped his back pocket. It was empty. A profound shock jolted him back to the present. He looked down at the boy, really looked at him for the first time. He saw the cheap, soaked jacket. He saw the skinny frame and the dirt smudged on his cheek. He saw the raw honesty in the boy's wide, dark eyes, an honesty that seemed completely out of place given the kid's obvious poverty. Slowly, as if in a trance, Diesel reached out and took the wallet. His large, calloused fingers brushed against the boy's small, cold ones. He opened it. He saw the thick stacks of 50s and 20s, the donation money, untouched. Every single dollar was there. The world tilted on its axis for Diesel. Everything he thought he knew about people, about the hardness of the world, was being challenged by a 10-year-old boy in a dirty jacket. The confrontation that followed was not one of anger or suspicion. It was a confrontation with an idea, with a truth Diesel had long since buried. He was confronted by pure, unvarnished integrity, offered up by a child who had every reason in the world to be dishonest. He knelt, bringing himself down to the boy's level. The sheer size of him was still intimidating, but his movements were slow, gentle. "What's your name, son?" he asked, his voice a low rumble, stripped of its earlier edge. "Leo," the boy whispered, still intimidated by the circle of giants around him. "Leo," Diesel repeated, the name feeling important. "Why'd you give this back? There's a lot of money in here. You could have just kept it." Leo swallowed hard. He looked past the biker toward the dark mouth of the alley. "My dad," he said softly. "He told me that what you do when no one's watching is who you really are. I want to be a good man, like him." The simple, honest words struck Diesel with the force of a physical blow. They bypassed the calloused walls he had built around his heart and landed squarely in the place where his own grief and honor resided. He had spent his life running into burning buildings, acting on a code of duty. This small, hungry boy standing in the rain understood that code better than most adults he knew. He saw a flicker of something in the boy's eyes, not just pride, but a deep, aching sadness. He followed the boy's glance toward the alley. His firefighter's instincts, the ones that read scenes and saw what was missing, what was wrong, kicked in with full force. This wasn't just a poor kid. This was a kid in trouble. Diesel stood up. He turned to his brothers, his face set like concrete. The other Iron Saints were watching him, their expressions a mixture of awe and confusion. They had seen Diesel angry, they had seen him focused, but they had rarely seen him like this. He looked shaken to his core. "We're not leaving," he said. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. His word was law in this club. He turned back to Leo. "Are you hungry, Leo?" Leo nodded, unable to speak. "Come on," Diesel said, placing a heavy hand on the boy's thin shoulder. "Let's get you something to eat. Anything you want." He led the boy into the Iron Skillet diner. The bell over the door jingled and the whole place went quiet. Heads turned as the massive biker and the small, ragged boy walked to a booth in the corner. Diesel ordered a feast, a cheeseburger with extra bacon, a mountain of fries, a chocolate milkshake, and a slice of apple pie. He told the waitress to pack up 3 more of the same to go. While Leo ate with a ravenous but polite hunger, Diesel talked to him. He didn't ask questions like a cop or a social worker. He spoke to him like an equal. He asked about his father, about school, about his favorite superhero. And slowly, the story came out. The story of the alley, of his sick mother, of his little sister. The immediate threat, the boy's hunger, was neutralized. But Diesel knew the real rescue had just begun. When Leo finished, Diesel paid the bill with a $100 bill and told the waitress to keep the change. Then, with the bags of hot food in one hand, he followed Leo back out into the cold and into the darkness of the alley. What he saw there stopped him in his tracks. The shelter was a pathetic construction of cardboard, rotting pallets, and a ripped blue tarp. It was a place not fit for an animal, let alone a family. Inside, a woman was racked by a terrible cough, the sound echoing wetly in the confined space. A little girl with huge, fearful eyes peeked out from under a thin, stained blanket. Maria, Leo's mother, saw the giant silhouette of the biker blocking the meager light, and she flinched, pulling her daughter closer. Fear, sharp and primal, flashed across her face. This was how it ended, she thought. Some monster from the streets had found them. But Diesel didn't move forward. He stopped at the entrance to their makeshift home. He spoke, and his voice was the one he used to use on scared people trapped in crushed cars, a voice that was impossibly calm and reassuring. "Ma'am," he said softly, "my name is Frank. Your son, Leo, he did something for me today. He's a good kid, an honorable kid. I brought you all some food." He placed the bags on a dry piece of cardboard just outside their shelter. He didn't try to enter. He gave them space. His brothers had followed. They stood back, a silent, leather-clad honor guard, their faces grim as they took in the scene. Without a word, one of them, a man called Preacher, passed a hat. The rustle of wallets being opened, of cash being pulled out, was the only sound for a moment. Diesel's instincts, the ones that had guided him through 100 fires, were screaming. He saw the mother's feverish flush, the child's pallor, the damp chill that clung to everything. This wasn't just poverty, it was a crisis. It was an emergency. He looked at Maria. "Ma'am, you're not spending another night out here. My friends and we've got a room for you at a motel down the street. It's warm. It has beds." Tears streamed down Maria's face, silent and hot. It wasn't a rescue from a predator, but a rescue from something far more relentless: hopelessness. For the first time in months, someone saw them, not as trash, not as a problem, but as people. The first step to healing began that night. The Iron Saints paid for a month at a clean, safe motel. They filled the small fridge with groceries. The preacher, who was a paramedic in his day job, took one look at Maria and made a call to a doctor he knew, getting her a prescription for powerful antibiotics. Another brother, whose wife was a social worker, started making calls about housing assistance. They bought new coats for the children, warm boots, and thick socks. Sophia, the little girl, clutched a new teddy bear one of the bikers had bought her, her eyes wide with a wonder she hadn't felt in a very long time. Leo stood quietly through it all, watching this whirlwind of kindness his one small act of honesty had unleashed. He was just a boy, but in that moment, he felt like the man his father had always wanted him to be. 1 year later, the alley was just a bad memory. The family lived in a small, 2-bedroom apartment on the west side of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, it was warm, and it was theirs. The walls were decorated with Sophia's colorful drawings and Leo's good grades from school, stuck to the refrigerator with cartoon magnets. The air smelled of cinnamon and the cheap, sweet perfume Maria wore to her new job. Diesel had pulled some strings with the owner of the Iron Skillet Diner. Maria, her health fully restored, was now their best and most reliable prep cook. She worked hard, her hands moving with a speed and efficiency that earned her the respect of the kitchen staff. The pride in her eyes when she brought home a steady paycheck was a light that had been extinguished for far too long. Leo was thriving. He was a star pupil in the 5th grade, his sharp mind finally free to focus on books instead of survival. He had friends. He was on the school's soccer team. He had lost the haunted, watchful look of the alley cat and replaced it with the easy confidence of a boy who knew where his next meal was coming from. He was still quiet, still thoughtful, but now he smiled easily. One afternoon, his mother saw him give his own lunch to a new kid at school who had forgotten his, a simple act of paying kindness forward. Diesel, or Uncle Frank as the kids now called him, had become family. He was a constant, steady presence in their lives. He showed up for Sophia's dance recitals and Leo's soccer games. His massive frame and Iron Saints cut a startling but welcome sight among the other parents. He helped Leo with his math homework at the kitchen table, his huge, scarred fingers looking clumsy as they pointed at fractions. He taught him how to change the oil in a car and how to stand up to a bully without throwing a punch. They weren't just a charity case to him. They were his anchor. They had rescued him from his own drifting loneliness as much as he had rescued them from the street. The impact rippled even further. The story of Leo and the wallet became a legend within the Iron Saints MC. It was a story told to new prospects, a reminder of the club's true code of honor, which went far beyond brotherhood and bikes. Inspired by what had happened, Diesel and his club president officially started a new charitable arm of their organization. They called it Leo's Ledger. Using the initial $3,000 from the wallet as seed money, they created a foundation dedicated to providing rapid, no red tape assistance to homeless families with children. They helped with security deposits for apartments, paid for emergency medical care, bought school supplies, and filled empty pantries. It wasn't a handout, it was a hand up, the same one they had given to Leo's family. The story of their first success, the family they had pulled from the alley, brought in donations from all over the city. On a bright Saturday afternoon, 2 years after they first met, Diesel and Leo sat on a park bench eating ice cream. Leo was taller now, losing the sharp angles of childhood as he headed toward his teens. He was happy. He was safe. "You know, kid," Diesel said, his voice a low rumble, "I was having a bad day, that day we met. I was thinking the world was a pretty rotten place." Leo looked up at the big man, his hero. "Was it because of the fire?" he asked. Maria had told him gently about Frank's past. Diesel nodded, surprised as always by the boy's perception. Yeah, it was. My dad used to say that even in the dark, there's always a little bit of light, Leo said, licking his ice cream cone. You just have to be brave enough to be the one to turn it on. Diesel looked at the boy, this incredible kid who had faced the darkest parts of the world and chosen to bring his own light. He had chosen honor over survival, integrity over desperation. And that single choice, that one small act of a good man in the making, hadn't just saved his own family. It had sparked a fire of kindness that was now warming hundreds of others. True wealth, Diesel realized, was never about what was in your wallet. It was about what was in your heart. It was about the character you owned, the one thing no one could ever take away. And Leo, the boy from the alley, was the richest person he had ever known.